1769. At 7 a.m, weighed anchor with a light breeze at west and clear weather, and made sail out of the bay.
If you say so, James. A nice early start for my next leg. Up the Coromandel, aboard the historic launch PHIEU.
Okay.
Morning, Peter.
How are you?
Oh, well, thank you.
This is beautiful.
Yeah. You mean Dick there or the boat?
Dick, yeah. Oh, Dick's very attractive.
I thought he looks quite the part sitting over there, doesn't he?
How old's the boat?
Ah, the boat. PHIEU. PHIEU's, what, 97 years old.
Technically speaking, PHIEU was a triple diagonal Cody double-ended launch. This type of boat was expensive to buy, but very popular for both commercial and recreational use. The 3 layers of Cody provide great strength and durability, and several of these boats are still around today. Keith, Dick and the PHIEU are taking me from Mercury Bay up around the top of the Coromandel Peninsula and down the Firth of Thames to Thames. The PHIEU has been carefully preserved after a lifetime of hard work.
This boat was built to tow shingle and sand and cement from around the harbours to downtown Auckland, where her owners, the PHIEU Cement Company of Australasia, were constructing King's Wharf. In 1913, she was sold to the Harbour Board, and she was an assistant pilot boat, you know, and a medical boat actually for many, many years, 80-odd years.
Yeah.
The hull is incredibly sound.
Yeah.
The decks, the superstructure are original and sound. She'll take any sea. Any 97-year-old boat will take any sea, almost by definition. She's low in the water, she's easy, she glides through the water very finely as old wooden boats do.
Yeah.
And while she doesn't carry a sail, this thing's the nearest thing to a sailboat you could get.
It's taken us 4 hours to sail up here this morning. It took Cook 4 days before he saw this cape, which he named for Lord Colville of the British Admiralty.
The weather here in Colville Channel can cut up really rough, and on the map it's marked with those little squiggly lines that mean here there be tigers. No tigers here today. It's just perfect. But when Cook sailed round here and into the Firth of Thames, he couldn't tell whether it was a big wide bay or the mouth of an enormous river. So he sailed down into it to find out.
Maintaining historic boats like the PHIEU is a costly and ongoing business, but Keith Pine believes preserving New Zealand's maritime history and the skills learned over time will help us in the future.
We're a little country, we can't afford to cut off bits of our past, bits of our knowledge, and start again with some fresh industries.
Right.
What we can do is evolve. We can take what we've got and apply new technology to it and spin off in different directions and build. And I don't think we see enough of that, and I don't think we look back enough in this glossy new plastic life we lead at old boats like this one.
Cook sailed down here, sticking to the eastern coast. It wasn't until he was a long way down that he could see that it was in fact a wide bay. With the water level dropping steadily, Cook sailed as far as he dared, then anchored the Endeavour in about 6 fathoms. We've timed our arrival in Thames with the high tide. But down here, high tide is a relative term.
Currently we appear to have almost nothing under the hull.
Well, in point of fact, the radar screen suggests we have nothing under the hull, but we are moving forward.
When Cook came up here, he basically dangled a bit of knotted string over the side and read it out as he went up.
With the plumb bowl technology, yes.
Yeah.
These days, of course, it's a depth sounder and a fish finder and all the rest of it, which I'm actually quite grateful for at the moment.
Captain's log, 20th November 1769. I resolved to go no further with the ship, but to examine the head of the bay in the Bull. I thought this a good opportunity to see a little of the interior part of the country, and its produce.
It's time to farewell the PHIEU and catch my next lift. Another historic vessel, this time a steamboat. The river and the marshland reminded Cook of home, so he called it the River Thames. To the local Haureki people, it was the Waiho. They invited Cook into one of their pa, built on a bank of sand in the middle of deep mud. This was Cook's only river trip in New Zealand, and the furthest inland he would ever venture. And isn't this a great sight? The vintage steamboat Greenbank, plying the Waiho like boats of yesteryear when the river was a major transportation route. This steam engine is believed to be the only one of its size still operating anywhere in the world. For its owner, the restoration was a labour of love.
I served an apprenticeship in the Union Steamship Company's workshops in Auckland, and then I went to sea for a while, and I suppose it's a bit of nostalgia in some ways for the steam plant, and put some obsolete knowledge to use.
Yeah.
I almost gave it up 3 or 4 years ago. She sank the moorings in Pyro. The others prevailed on me, and it was about half a dozen guys all working frantically. They got her up and onto the slip, so we started all over again.
First timber, then gold drew settlers here, and their isolated communities were linked by the Waiho River. There were regular cargo and passenger services from Auckland to Pairoa, which was built at the head of navigation.
All our food stuff, our mail, you know, everything we wanted came via the river. It was our lifeline. The Taniwha and the Waimarie that came from Auckland, they come from Auckland down through the sand spit through to Thames, direct to Pairoa. And we were governed by the tide, so 1 week the boats would come during the day, and the next week they would come during the night. And it'd take 12 hours to get down.
It must have been really romantic, eh?
It really was, yeah.
I mean, you crash through the Firth of Thames and then come up here on this cruise, river sailing.
Cook was mightily impressed by what he called the lofty trees that covered this whole valley. This was once a forest of massive kahikatea, or white pine.
He walked about 100 yards into the dense bush and he found this huge tree that he measured with his quadrant, and it was 365 feet from the bottom to the top.
So what happened to the tree that Cook measured?
Well, it stood for many years, but unfortunately the family that ran the mill here felled it. There's no left at all now.
Nothing, eh? It's just decimated.
It was because of Captain Cook's enthusiastic description of the Thames Valley kahikatea trees that brought other ships to seek the timber.
25 years after Cook, the first ship arrived seeking timber for the English Navy in the Napoleonic Wars.
Well, this is where the Fancy lay. She was one of the ships that came in the wake of Cook, following Cook's map to get the kahikatea.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and she was there for 3 months loading.
3 months?
3 months
just to load the ship?
Yeah.
So they were loading serious logs out of here. The beginning of industry, but the end of the forest. Yeah, well, that's a shame.
I left the Green Bank and the Waiho River reluctantly, but I had to catch my next lift, up to the City of Sails. When James Cook and his colleagues returned from their excursion up the Waiho River, they were caught by the ebb tide and had to spend a cold, wet night holed up on their rowboats. When they eventually got back to the Endeavour, the anchor was raised and the ship began what would be a very slow and difficult trip back up the Firth of Thames.
Think I'm going to be able to get across there, Tom?
Well, that's up to you. How far can you jump?
I'll give you a hand. Oh, we should be able to make it. Have a look.
She'll come in.
Thank you, bro. Excellent.
Well, welcome aboard, Peter.
Thanks, mate.
Yeah.
Cheers. Good day for it?
I reckon it's just coming right.
Excellent.
Tide's coming in. All good as gold, eh?
My lift is the Ted Ashby, a replica of the scows or butter boxes that were really the Mack trucks of their day, hauling anything and everything round the coast, mainly of the North Island. Sadly, only a few scows remain, so preserving their legacy motivated the National Maritime Museum in Auckland to build this replica. Although inspired by the scows that plied the Great Lakes in North America, New Zealand scows of the late 19th and early 20th century developed their own characteristic form and construction. But all things pass, and just like the lead line was rendered obsolete by the echo sounder, road and rail transport overtook the old scows.
2 metres.
However, their unique contribution to pioneer New Zealand can't be overlooked. Today, the Ted Ashby is taking me from Thames, up the Firth and into Auckland, the City of Sails and the Waitemata Harbour. The Darroch family name is synonymous with scow building in New Zealand, and Graham Darroch is helping keep their memory alive today.
Once the big sailing ships came in from overseas and offloaded their cargo, the load was then divided up, and a scow would then pick up that cargo and take it to wherever it was wanted. Because these vessels here, being flat bottom, were able to go up all the old side creeks with cargo, unload it, and get away on the tide. They were a very, very hardy boat.
Right.
You know, and
so the road transport of its day, really?
The road transport of its day. I mean, these were the trucks of yesteryear, basically.
Yeah.
I love sail, and that's it in a nutshell. It's a different way of travel. You haven't got the high-speed whine of turbines rattling in your ears every time you go out somewhere. If I could do away with motors, I would.
Do you find that when people come aboard, they get, I don't know, the romance of sail catches up with them? Do you find that?
Oh, definitely, yes. Yeah.
What happens?
I mean, it's marvellous when, you know, you motor away from the dock and they sit there and they look fairly interested, but really, oh, this is just another harbour cruise. And then we offer them, would you like to help pull up the sails? And some of them take that up. And the crew put the sails up and we get going. And then I switch the motors off. And that's the good part.
Yeah.
The smiles just come out, they just can't believe it, you know. It's just, gosh, this is great.
Yeah.
The noises, the chuckle of the water and the blocks squeaking and the ropes squeaking. And, yeah, really good, really good.
Cook saw few signs of life up the western coast of the Firth, although he could be excused for not looking too hard.
The Endeavour sailed up here in rain, hail, squalls and thunder and lightning. It was vile. And they anchored off Waiheke up here to my right. And Cook noted that there appeared to be good harbour and good anchorages up in there, but he wasn't prepared to explore it at the time. So the next day they took off and went up north. And thus they missed the entire Auckland harbour, in there behind Rangitoto.
A strong southwest gale carried the Endeavour northward, but I'm heading off Cook's course for a while to take in the rich maritime history of Auckland, the city of sails. Few modern cities know the exact date, place and manner of their birth, but Auckland does. In April 1840, surveyor Felton Matthew began searching the northeast coast for the best harbour on which to build a new capital. Matthew settled on the Waitemata and a volcanic isthmus known to the Māori as Tamaki Makaurau. After short negotiations with local Ngāti Whātua iwi, the British flag was raised on September the 18th, 1840. Straight after the ceremony, the officials decided to have a boat race, another for the sailors and one for Māori waka. This was the first Auckland Anniversary Day Regatta. It was formally established as an annual event in January 1850 and has been held ever since, with only one cancellation in 1900 for the Boer War. It's hailed as the biggest one-day regatta in the world, the perfect way for Aucklanders to celebrate their enduring passion for sailing in the sea. And today is cause for another celebration. The Jessie Logan is a legend on Auckland Harbour. She won 9 Anniversary Day regattas in a row in the 1880s. Jessie could be the oldest privately owned yacht still afloat in the world, but she was so very nearly lost.
In 1905 she was converted to a fishing launch, and we picked her up from people called Paul and Alison Winter in Nelson, who'd saved her from destruction.
Right.
And they cared for her, took her home, put her in their garden, kept her painted, kept her covered, and used her as a child's playhouse.
Oh, okay.
So that Winter family saved the boat.
Following the remarkable success of the Jessie Logan, New Zealand's very first manufactured exports were 3 racing yachts sent to Australia, and Auckland's boat builders began to establish themselves internationally.
There were 2 main ones, the Baileys and the Logans,
right,
who were head-to-head, and they improved one another's craft by the competition.
Right.
And the result of that competition was, of course, that our boats got to be, frankly, the best in the Southern Hemisphere.
Harold and co-owner Keith Pine from the Wherro have extensively renovated the Jessie Logan, and today she's in a fleet of modern and classic yachts set to race around Rangitoto Island. This is Jessie's first race in nearly 100 years.
So what's special about the rig aboard this boat?
Well, it's a gaff cutter spar on top of the mainsail. We've got a topmast too. They went out about 1895.
Right.
Yeah.
And there's what, a trysail or something that runs off there?
There's a topsail, a huge topsail, which we haven't been game to set yet.
So she was a damn fast boat.
She was a freak.
Yeah.
Absolute freak. When she was built, she was extreme, and she still is extreme.
New Zealand's prominence in international sailing comes on the back of 120 years of excellence in racing yacht design and construction, starting with boats like the Jessie Logan. And wouldn't you know it? Jessie won her class in the race and came very close to taking line honours. Once again, she's the yacht everyone wants to beat. Just like another boat, very familiar in these waters. Proof of the importance of keeping New Zealand's maritime heritage alive is the 2 America's Cup wins. They're the result of a long history of enterprise and innovation, and the desire to keep the winning edge drives the black boats on as they're constantly trialled, tested and raced on the Hauraki Gulf.
Hello Peter, welcome on board.
Thanks, Tom. Lifelong dream.
Oh, that's great. Fantastic. For a lot of people, I think.
Yeah, I think so, yeah.
That's right, for all of us, that's for sure.
Yeah. Just touch this thing, I said.
That's right.
Fantastic.
It's not the old touch wood, it's touch carbon these days.
What is it about New Zealanders particularly that lends us, you think, to being such good sailors?
I don't know. I think that maybe it's part of the colonial pioneering spirit. You need to be independent.
Yeah.
To be a good sailor, to be a successful sailor, you have to be resourceful, and you've got to have imagination, you've got to have courage and convictions, determination. Yeah. All those things I think you needed to have. The early settlers needed to have those to make it in this new world. Yeah. And perhaps that's helped us. This is a very interesting piece of water, the Hauraki Gulf, and it rewards close study and good understanding, and that's what we're trying to achieve.
How do you rate your chances for holding on to the cup?
We've got a good chance. If we put together an honest campaign, and that's what we're trying to do, I think we've got good chances. If we're aiming at building new boats, we figure that the best challenges will have boats which are probably better than this boat, and that if we don't build a boat that's better than this boat by a fair margin, then we won't have done our best.
The legacy of New Zealand's maritime history has put the country's boats and sailors on top of the world. With such an illustrious past, there should be every confidence in the future. The next leg of my journey around New Zealand is aboard the Navy's Anzac frigate, Te Kaha, which is on its way to an exercise in Australia. The Navy hails the Te Kaha as a huge leap forward from previous frigates in terms of technology and operational capability. And although its purchase was clouded by controversy, it has already embarked on a wide and varied career.
We've done some work down in the deep Southern Ocean, chasing the Patagonian toothfish poachers. That was in early '99. That was very, very important that we established our position within that area down near the Ross Dependency.
Sure, yeah.
East Timor, more warlike. Operations in the Gulf, although not war, mopping up after the '91 war.
Right.
And then peacekeeping activities in the Solomon Islands. So it's a wide range of activity.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
We are going to need to push on pretty quickly to get you to Robben Island on time, but also to get us to Sydney on time. We're pretty keen to get there before lunch on Saturday.
Oh, okay. So how long does it take to get across? 3 or 4 days?
3 days we'll take, and that's averaging around about 18 and a half knots.
That's pretty quick, isn't it?
We need to get across there.
So what will you do flat out?
27, and hopefully we'll be able to demonstrate that to you this afternoon. In fact, we're going to need to do it to get you up there on time.
The Te Kaha is taking me from her home at Devonport Naval Base in Auckland up to Roberton Island in the Bay of Islands. It'll be a very quick trip, about 4 hours, pretty much the same time as it takes to drive.
We're in deep water now, so we can go flat out without causing any drag up off the sea floor. The big, huge gas turbines have kicked in. And look at the size of this wake. We're like we're in a gigantic speedboat. We're hooning along.
In the operations room, the nerve centre of Te Kaha, the crew are simulating an attack on the ship by enemy warplanes.
All positions, PHIEU, raid now closing. Green 45 at 39 miles, correlates with EW, APG 66, ties in with A4Ks.
Good range.
Closing 068 at 26 miles. Threat warning red, I say again, threat warning red. Send the ship to action stations. EWD PHIEU, Charles Sierra Port, starboard launchers, engage.
Roger.
Also watch PHIEU, come hard left, 300, increase 25. Take hostile with Sparrow. First raid now crossing ahead of the ship, sir, taking with
76 is kill.
Roger, assess kill, pass kill. First aircraft now ahead of the ship, assess, taken with Sparrow. Ceasefire. All positions, stand to, check for damage, report damage and casualty to the ops room.
It's pretty intense here.
Yeah, it's pretty full on, but they train you for 9 months solid and drill you so that you become excellent at reacting to things, obviously, because there's no room for mistakes. If you make a mistake, people die, and that's not a good thing.
The Endeavour anchored in what Cook called Bream Bay to celebrate his crew finally catching a decent haul of fish. The bay was also distinguished by a group of islands that Cook called the Hen and Chickens. Close to Bream Head, Cook noted what he thought was a river mouth. Actually, it's the entrance to Whangarei Harbour, and just tucked inside the heads, the deep water port of the Marsden Point oil refinery.
Over my right shoulder are some of the world's best-known diving waters. The marine reserve at Poor Knights Islands, so named by Cook. Nobody seems to know why, but one theory is that he was eating an old-fashioned English pudding called a Poor Knight's pudding. Just past the Poor Knights Island, several waka containing a couple of hundred people came alongside. Now, these are the first Maori Cook had seen since the Coromandel, and they told him that they were expecting him. So clearly there was a fairly remarkable communications network in place.
Cook noted these northern Maori had elaborate thigh and buttock tattoos similar to those he'd seen in Tahiti. However, in contrast to Maori Cook had met so far, only a few of these people had tattooed faces. Cook observed the Maori here made a very good appearance, being all stout, well-made men. The Endeavour passed a cape and a small island nearby with a hole pierced right through it. Cook named them after Sir Percy Brett of the British Admiralty. A great many waka, carrying an estimated 400 to 500 people, came out to see the strange ship. According to local iwi, this area was one of the very early sites of Polynesian settlement in Aotearoa. The Maori here traced their origins from Kupe, the voyager who first circumnavigated the North Island. Cook took advantage of favourable winds to sail on, up to a group of islands he named Cavelli, after the Cavelli fish or horse mackerel his crew traded with the locals. But Joseph Banks described the Maori behaviour here as most abominably saucy, and Cook himself, after being showered with rocks, fired on a warrior with small shot and hit him in the head. Later, Maori told Cook that the man had died. A rugged northwesterly gale forced Cook to run for shelter, back here, where the Takaha drops me off. The Endeavour anchored in the lee of a beautiful little island the Maori called Motu Arohia, also known today as Roberton Island. At first there was peaceful trading, but when Maori made off with the Endeavour's anchor buoy, a cannonball was fired over their heads. Cook decided to go ashore and set off in 2 boats with botanists Banks and Solander and a party of Marines.
They came ashore on the western side of the island and were immediately confronted by between 500 and 600 Maori who came at them from both sides, shouting and brandishing weapons. Cook and Banks marched towards them, and Cook drew a line in the sand and indicated that the warriors shouldn't cross, but it was too late because a large group had already come in behind them. There was a lot of confusion, a lot of shouting, a haka rang out, and so did some musket fire. Cook could no longer retreat because of the group behind him and couldn't make his way back to the boats. Those left on board the Endeavour knew that they had to do something, and fast. So they brought the ship broadside into the bay and fired cannon shot over the heads of the Maori, causing them to retreat. Perhaps somewhat surprisingly, Cook and his crew decided not to leave. They just laid down their weapons and started to gather wild celery. Well, you would, wouldn't you?
Cook called this place the Bay of Islands, and the Endeavour stayed 6 days. The crew were most impressed by the huge fishing nets the Maori used with tremendous results. My next lift is also part of the Great Bay of Islands fishing story. The Otaheite was one of 4 fishing boats built for legendary American author and angler Zane Grey. It was feared that the Otaheite had been lost, but in 1976 she resurfaced in Taupō, where she'd been for 30 years under the name Rangatira. After a mammoth restoration effort by the trust that owns her, the Otaheite is back home doing what she does best.
When was the last time you got a marlin aboard?
Oh, well, last week. We've got a couple of 100-kilo striped marlin, which we released both of them.
Good, yeah. And you promote tag and release on this boat?
Yeah, we promote tag and release. The only time we take fish is because we're hungry. The original design of these boats was for whale chasing. They had nothing in them, just a big engine, right, and a harpoon gun. And a harpoon at the front. Yeah, so we're very light. Yeah, they could go like Billy. And they built several of them for launches, like this one.
Zane Grey called the Bay of Islands the Angler's Eldorado, and his books full of tall tales and true made this area world famous for big game fishing.
Any truth to the rumour that he used to charter 4 or 5 boats and whoever was catching the fish he'd go and jump on board?
He was full of all sorts of tricks, I'd go from the records. All sorts of tricks, but game fishing is much more regulated these days than it was in those days. So he really wasn't doing anything wrong.
Times have certainly changed. Conservation of big game fish is now a top priority.
Take and release is really, really important, isn't it? I mean,
when we got the regulation from the minister,
yeah,
we had an obligation to release half our fish.
Right.
And we've been pretty good about doing that. It took a little while to get going, but we do, not this club, the whole of New Zealand takes more than half the fish. Well over 60, 70% sometimes.
If you had to name one thing that was the best thing about big game fishing, what would it be?
Game fishing is the greatest leveller of people that you can have. Because you can have $1 million boat and you can have a cheap boat, and the cheap boat will go out and catch the biggest fish. It's a great leveller. Works well.
Do you find that the big game fishing brings out the best or the worst in people?
Oh no, I don't know any bad game fishing people, and I bring out the best in people without a doubt.
Yeah, you don't know any bad game fishing people. How diplomatic, God bless you. Cheers.
Cheers.
Sitting here at Waitangi, I'm moved by the beauty of the location. But I'm also aware that I'm about to cross into largely unknown territory. I've been invited to join in the rehearsal of Waitangi Day celebrations for Wakatoa. This is a brief but total immersion in Maori culture for me, and I'm nervous about being appropriately sensitive to the culture and its traditions. It's an odd feeling, that of being a visitor in one's own country. Odd, but not uncomfortable. After all, they are sailors and seafarers too. Today, Waitangi has a new waka on show, a community effort by both Māori and Pākehā at Whangaroa Harbour, just north of the Bay of Islands. This waka, Te O Kaha, was built by local young people under the guidance of master carver Heck Busby, and is dedicated to giving the young a sense of pride, purpose and identity.
Well, the waka part of this is part of our ancestor, is part of our genealogy. Every iwi has a waka, and all those waka are identified as part of their history.
But the way we looked at it, we needed a canoe. We needed a waka for the younger people, one that belonged to them, one that they could look after and manage.
It will bring the whānau together. They'll grow up together. It will make them respect one another and aroha and bind together.
As you know, amongst our young people today, there's no work. There's nothing to look forward to. And when they have something like that to happen, and they're part of it, it makes all that difference. It makes all that difference. They get their self-esteem and their well-being and their confidence and all that sort of stuff. For me, it really makes my day when I watch them.
I'm immensely grateful for the honour of being invited aboard the Great Wakatoa with 140 warriors working in perfect harmony. It's extraordinarily powerful, but I've never felt less significant or so pudgy or pasty.
Ka whiriwhireu ki roto I tērā tirohanga. I pēhai tika ki roto I tōku. Mēn takota ka hia hiano, pērā tonu tōna ti tiro mai kia hau. Nā I roto e rā whiriwhiritanga, ka puta mai te puawaitanga, ngā rauraru e mea ni tātou ke tika.
French nuclear testing in the Pacific united Kiwi sailors in a common cause, and the Greenpeace-backed protest fleets became an annual event throughout the 70s, 80s, and up to 1995, when the French finally capitulated. One New Zealand ship that made the long and dangerous trip to Mururoa Atoll in 1985 was the Artaka Thompson.
Peter!
Russell.
Nice to meet you.
Pleased to meet you.
Come aboard.
Thank you.
So this is it. What do you think?
Well, I think she's gorgeous.
Okay.
Labour of love?
Oh, yes, that's right, yeah.
The Artaka Thompson is taking me from Opua in the Bay of Islands up to the Cavalli Islands, the last resting place of the Greenpeace protest ship, the Rainbow Warrior.
You would have seen ships like this around this coast from about, well, 1830 on, when they built a small schooner here in Paihia.
Stand by to set the main, slowly on the peak.
So she's based upon a halibut schooner of the Northwest American coast,
Right.
which were considered fast, sea-kindly, easily managed.
Stand by the halyards, downholes off.
This was the culmination of the technology, really.
Yeah.
This particular rig. It was after that steam came in, swept them off the oceans.
That'll do it, belay.
When you compare us with Cook and the people of that era, there's no way that we're as knowledgeable. So we're really Johnny-come-latelys, and we try to do it. But they had a particular skill and knowledge honed for thousands of years, and they hadn't lost it. Steam came along, they were gone, swept away. All that knowledge went with them too. The same as GPS has come along, navigation, forget it.
On leaving the Bay of Islands, the Endeavour came to the brink of disaster. Here at Okahu Island, the wind suddenly dropped and a strong tide pushed the ship towards the rocks. A large crowd of Maori gathered on shore. One of the crew wrote in his log that they were rejoicing at our misfortune, expecting us to be a prey for them. After a tense struggle, one of the Endeavour's rowboats managed to drag the ship away from calamity.
Shortly afterwards, however, they struck another rock further out. And Cook called it Whale Rock. But they hit it on the windward side, they hit it a glancing blow and moved away, and there was no real damage. Banks, however, was upset and wrote in his log that the almost certainty of being eat adds not a little to the terrors of being shipwrecked.
The Artaka Thompson has also come perilously close to being wrecked. During a world trip, shortly after being launched, a huge Atlantic storm had Russell and his crew hanging on for grim death.
I remember sitting at the wheel, leaning back, she's going down, she's going to come up? And the wave went through and she came up and down the next one. So the ship ran up to 18 knots. Well, it can't do 18 knots. The thing about a storm like that, and people can try and write about it and take photographs of it, but it's the noise of the wind. As if it wants to drive you mad before it kills you.
Yeah.
So that was our blooding, and we felt good at the end, and we thought, by God, we've got a good ship.
High on the headland at Matari Bay is the Rainbow Warrior Memorial, erected in honour of the ship blasted by French agents in Auckland in 1985. The memorial looks out towards the last resting place of the Rainbow Warrior, scuttled in 1987 off the Cavalli Islands as an artificial reef. It's become a very popular dive site, and I had to go down to take a look for myself. I'm making sure that I do everything slowly and properly to ensure my own safety and that of my dive buddy, Andy Hopping. I've never dived so deep before, between 80 and 100 feet, and always previously in sheltered waters. I have no idea what to expect, but let's just say that sharks are the last thing that I'm concerned about. We followed the rope to the bottom and, yes, I managed to film the hole in the side of the Rainbow Warrior. It's an eerie place. Beautiful but tinged with a sense that somehow it shouldn't be there, although it's now home to thousands. With only one light working, visibility rapidly disappearing, and getting low on air, we decided to resurface. I was tired and quite relieved to be back up top.
Captain's log, 19th December 1769. Daylight brought us in a deep bay, the bottom of which we could but just see. This bay I have named Doubtless Bay. The wind not permitting us to look in, we steered for the westernmost land we had in sight.
Maori who came out to the Endeavour in Waka told Cook that 3 days paddling from here, the land ended at a place they called Mura Whenua. And that's where we're heading aboard another historic boat, the ketch Ranui.
We're going round the great convergence off North Cape of the two great oceans where they meet. It can cut up some fairly enormous seas and can send tremendous conditions. So we've got to take advantage of this window of opportunity that we've got at the present time. Clear skies, little wind, beautiful sea state, and we're going to try and scuttle round.
Ranui's eventually going to take me down to the Kaipara harbour on the west coast, but today we're aiming to cross from the Pacific Ocean to the Tasman Sea by dusk. Built of kauri, teak and totara, the Ranui was bought in 1996 by Dunedin lawyer Richard Allen.
She was built in 1936 in Stewart Island in Port Pegasus by the Norwegian manager of that whaling station. In those days they wanted to go down to Antarctica, chasing whales, all that sort of stuff. So she's very, very strongly built.
The Ranui was requisitioned by the New Zealand Navy and put into active service during the Second World War, when it was learnt that German ships were cruising the Southern Ocean.
One German ship was found cutting down trees on Campbell Islands because it had run out of coal for its bunkers. And so they quickly commandeered the Ranui and camouflaged her and sent her down. Sails all dyed, camouflaged, hull grey and black, the whole lot.
So she was a spy boat?
Yeah. Looking out for German destroyers coming to invade New Zealand.
After the war, the Ranui was refitted at the Devonport Naval Base and then spent the next 3 years in the Pacific. Back home, the ketch was radically changed into an oyster dredger and worked Fiordland and Foveaux Strait for 30 years. Richard, a former Olympic sailor and yachting coach for New Zealand, aimed to restore the Ranui to her past glory and extensively refitted her for charter work. But in the back of his mind is a world trip with his family. His young sons Nathan and Samir relish life on board.
They've been round boats since they've been born, and the intention is that we go away offshore and they will get an education from that, which I don't think they could get at school. I know my mother and mother-in-law aren't overly keen about the idea, but I'm sure it won't. I don't think it'll hurt them.
Right, hello. Too small. Yeah. Isn't that not too small for? I think that's too small.
We don't need any more. Undersized. It's undersized. See you.
The Ranui has also joined the latest New Zealand Peace Fleet, sailing into the middle of the Tasman Sea to protest the shipment of nuclear waste from Europe to Japan.
I've got a nephew who was born with a birth defect, and they said that was because my sister was near Chernobyl. So that's a matter that runs pretty close to my heart, and I've always supported Greenpeace and their anti-nuclear campaigns, and I still believe that it's the right thing to do to try and stop them, you know. And it kind of offends me to think of a guy bringing 230 kilos of plutonium nuclear-grade weapon fuel across our water, you know?
Yep.
In the same way that I don't like foreign-going trawlers taking our fish. It's kind of like someone coming in your backyard. It's our backyard, you know?
Yeah.
It was here that the Endeavour was hit by a series of vicious gales and for 3 days lost sight of land altogether. As Cook sailed up, the French ship Saint-Jean-Baptiste, captained by Jean de Surveille, was sailing down, but neither saw each other in the bad weather. In stark contrast to the Endeavour's healthy crew, de Surveille had already lost 60 of his men to scurvy. By mid-December, Cook and his crew were still battling the elements, but the captain knew the rolling swells from the west meant there was no more land ahead. He fought strong winds and tides to get close enough to fix the position of what he called North Cape. On Christmas Day, 1769, Cook recognised islands in the distance as the Three Kings, named and charted by Abel Tasman 130 years earlier, also on Christmas Day. There was huge celebration aboard the Endeavour. Finally, Cook had conclusive proof that he was charting the same coast as Tasman.
As I say, they had a great party, and Banks noted in his diary that all heads ached with the debauch the next day. Must have been tricky then, when 24 hours later they sailed smack into a hurricane, which mucked them around and messed them about and blew them to every point on the compass for 6 further days. Hell of a hangover.
Thankfully, conditions for us are a little gentler. The northern tip of the country is a place of huge significance for New Zealanders and a major landfall for mariners. And it holds a deep spiritual meaning for Māori, a place where spirits depart back to Hawaii. Even in good conditions, the chaos of the convergence of the Pacific and the Tasman is plain to see. It must have been hell out here for the Endeavour.
You can see here what's happening with the sea state, where they meet. It's just a turmoil. At the moment it's quite small, but it's really confused and messy. But out here, where they've rolled up on each other, this is quite extraordinary.
On New Year's Day, 1770, Cook and the Endeavour rounded Tasman's Cape Maria Van Diemen and headed south down the treacherous west coast of the North Island. I'm about to do the same. But for now, I think we've earned our own celebration. And so, with sincere apologies to Split Ends,